Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I'm your host, Joe Kuzma, and today I have a bullseye on my back for an article I posted over on our website, steelcityunderground.com. The article was entitled, "Was Heath Miller Forced to Retire?" And yes, the title of the article might be a little bit misleading, at least for what I'm advocating, or at least what I'm trying to suggest here in the article that I posted. And to better explain, I wanted to release an edition of my podcast today that pointed out my point of view as to what it relates with the headline of, "Was Heath forced to retire?" If you go back and we start reading some of the things the so-called experts say, whether they tweet or blog, the guys on Bleacher Report or ESPN, or even some of the guys that are actually hired by the NFL as, quote, they're insiders. We've heard things throughout the years like Ben Roethlisberger and Todd Haley not getting along, or Ben Roethlisberger requesting his release or requesting to be traded, just any dirt they could get on the Pittsburgh Steelers when they were, we were having those 8-8 seasons. They weren't necessarily the powerhouse team that they once were, and they were in kind of a rebuild mode without saying so. And you look at some of the cornerstones of this team over the years, and what has happened and transpired with some other players like a Hines Ward or a Troy Polamalu, and it's not very difficult to connect the dots for someone out there that wants just maybe a few more clicks to their website or a little bit more of their own personal attention. They might come out and just say, "Was Heath Miller forced to be released?" After all, a lot of these analysts were already calling for Heath's head for the offseason. They were saying, will the front office release him to get some cap savings? Will they bring Heath back in and say, "Heath, you need to take a pay cut so we could try and restructure your contract and get some more cap room"? Anything they could do to add more pieces to this team to make it better. So at the same time, why would they take a guy that has been one of the most consistent and durable players over the 11 seasons he has given to the Pittsburgh Steelers and force him out on the street? To me, that would never make any sense, and that's why I wanted to get out ahead of this story before it becomes a story. Because when you see last year what happened was the same situation with Troy Polamalu. Troy Polamalu had a year left on his contract, a guy that was always restructuring, a guy that had a lot more injuries in recent history. Actually, overall, if you look at the last 5 years that they both played, when you compare Troy Polamalu to Heath Miller. The way the Troy Polamalu situation went down, and similarly before that, a Hines Ward situation, it came off bad. And there still seems to be some bad blood, or maybe some animosity between the organization that is the Pittsburgh Steelers Football Club and the player that is Troy Polamalu. This past season, the Steelers had a 10th anniversary for the Super Bowl XL champions. They had everyone there. Jerome Bettis was there. You even seen, even Jeff Reed was there. I mean, there's some guys it was great to see back for the first time at Heinz Field during the celebration, but there was one body that was missing during this entire celebration, and it was Troy Polamalu. And then you see the Fox News puts out a report within the last week, and I say report, and if you could actually see me here in this word video instead of an audio broadcast, I'm putting the Dr. Evil Austin Powers quotation fingers in the air. I quote, "There's animosity between Troy Polamalu and the Pittsburgh Steelers." So it wouldn't take much for one of these other guys to simply write another report and say that Heath Miller was forced out the door. But it doesn't appear that that would be something, at least we're not hearing it from Heath Miller, and he was never a player that ever got up and celebrated like crazy. He would go on third down, he'd go across the middle, he gets a first down. He's not dropping the football like Antonio Brown or doing flips into the end zone like Antonio Brown, or doing the Spider-Man run, jump and crotch yourself into the field goal post like Antonio. Everything seems to be Antonio Brown here, but I think you get my point that Heath Miller is a very quiet and reserved individual. He kept a lot to his private life, and I think when you're looking at something like this, you look at the 11 seasons that Heath Miller has had, you look at a few of the injuries, and you look at a lot of the concerns of other players who are still in good health and can walk away from the game, and they're starting to do so because you're hearing a lot about concussions these days. And I think some of these guys are keeping in mind, how much more do I have to play? Is there more money I should make? Is there any more accolades or anything else that I need to put on my personal resume to stamp my greatness on this game of football? And I think Heath Miller is one of those guys that didn't have to go through all that. He's able to exit on top of the game, on top of his own game. He's one of two Steelers, if I'm going to pull this up here, he's one of the guys that was able to get over, well, he's one of 12 tight ends in NFL history to have over 6,000 yards receiving, or was it 6,500 yards receiving? I'm trying to look here. Sorry, I'm not able to pull it up right now. But you looked at Heath Miller played 168 games in his career. He started 167 of them, and he scored 45 touchdowns. He's in an elite class as far as not only just the Steeler tight ends, but Steeler wide receivers. One of the only guys that has maybe better statistics that they've accumulated over their career so far is Hines Ward. You look at any other tight end, and Heath Miller owns every category in that franchise, and he's also pretty much in good company if you look at tight ends through NFL history. Now, obviously, you're going to have other Steelers, maybe somebody like Antonio Brown that's going to surpass him in due time. Maybe it might only take Antonio another season if he has the fantasy video game numbers he put up this year. Or you look at somebody like even Greg Olsen, or obviously you look at Antonio Gates has had a great career, Tony Gonzalez, but Rob Gronkowski isn't up on that list yet and hasn't surpassed Heath Miller, and at some point he probably will within the next year or two. But you see the big names that I'm throwing out there, and it's going to lead to another article. It's going to be posted over on SteelCityUnderground.com tomorrow about whether Heath Miller is Hall of Fame material or not. But as far as the Steelers front office forcing Heath Miller out on the street, forcing him into retirement, I don't think that the front office held Heath hostage, and this was more a personal decision versus what happened with Troy Polamalu a year earlier. Even in the case of Troy Polamalu, you look at a player like Troy, who's also a Pro Bowler several times, also a two-time Super Bowl champion, having played in 3 Super Bowls just like Heath Miller. And he may have been just kind of on the downslide. He may have been in decline. I don't want to insinuate that Troy Polamalu wasn't a great player, but at some point in a football player's career, Father Time's going to catch up with you. And the injury bug and Father Time did catch up to Troy Polamalu. The Pittsburgh Steelers had to make a decision, and they had to make a decision soon because of the start of free agency and who they could pursue and what spots they needed to fill on the roster. And I think even if there was a backdoor conversation between the front office of the Pittsburgh Steelers and Heath Miller in regards to his retirement, that same front office learned a public relations lesson last year from the way they handled, or lack thereof handling, the Troy Polamalu situation. And therefore, I am one who advocates that this was not a decision made by the Steelers front office. Rather, it was a personal decision by Heath Miller to leave on top of his game as one of the all-time Pittsburgh Steeler greats.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.